Lost and lonely child, child who ran away, so far away from home, has found the grace to pray. She is kneeling in the dust, feeling her mistake, yet within the grief and pain, her soul has come awake. Lord, I know to be a child is more than I deserve. I return to be with you, content to simply serve. Lost and lonely child, child who ran away, rising up to walk again and go a different way, still so far from home, still so far apart, when a distant sight appears to heal a broken heart. Someone standing at the gate with a trusting face, someone running down the road till loving arms embrace. So we all must humbly kneel when we go astray, rising up to walk again and go a different way. God is standing at the gate with a trusting face. God is running down the road till loving arms embrace.
A reading from the Gospel of Luke. Now the tax collectors and sinners were gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to the father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him?" "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found."
Friends, some stories in the Bible are so familiar to us that it's easy to miss the details that are right in front of our faces. In fact, some cultural studies of the prodigal son narrative from Luke 15 that we just heard have shown that different people notice different details of the story. For example, one of my teachers in divinity school always said this story should be called the parable of the missing mother. For other people, however, maybe those that are well acquainted with hunger, for example, the note about the famine in the far country stands out really clearly. For societies that are oriented around fatherly leadership, the honor or dishonor of the patriarch in this story is a major detail. If we look closely, many small moments are tucked away in this parable. The description of what the pigs are fed, the younger son rehearsing what to say to his father, the father spotting the son while he's still a long way off, and the enslaved person's report to the elder brother and the elder brother's mention of a goat for a party with his friends. All of those are wrapped up in the details here. And together, they become much more than the sum of their parts. We even have details about ourselves that we put on the story. For example, being an older brother myself, I've always felt for the older brother in this story. And maybe you can reflect on when you've waited for someone's return, or felt someone else was unjustly celebrated, or maybe struck out on your own with an adventure in mind. The broad strokes and the small details of this familiar parable mean that everyone can relate to these particular characters. And the reality for all of us, however, is that the only stories we can truthfully tell are our own. Our stories look differently to others than they do to us, and perspectives and experiences and hopes shape the way we tell our own story. And one of the most important things that we can do for others is to listen to their stories and to let our truths live next to theirs. The characters in the story of the prodigal are not fully aware of each other's truths. Even as readers of the story, we're not fully aware of each character's truth. The younger son must have his reasons for asking for his inheritance before his father's death. And then when things don't work out, he tells himself a story about what will happen when he returns to his father's house. We don't have as much insight, however, into the story the father tells himself. He chooses to grant his younger son's request. We don't know how easy or difficult that was to do, but reading into the father's joy at the younger son's return, we can guess at the grief or loss he experienced in his son's absence. The elder brother tells some of his own story. He's been diligent in his work and in his dedication to his father. He had never asked for anything, but he is resentful of what's lavished on his younger brother. Without putting too many words in his mouth, I think we can safely assume that anyone who has worked diligently and consistently without recognition can understand the elder brother's resentment here in this story. All of these stories contain truth. The truth that each man told himself, and every one of us has a truth rooted in our perceptions, our experiences, and our hopes. And it's only when, equipped by grace, we listen to one another that our truths together can be reconciled in love and become a new story of hope and restoration. And so, friends, my challenge to all of us this week is that we will do the very intentional work of listening, so that in telling our own stories and hearing those of others, we can be open to where God is at work in the world around us.